Hi, this is Professor Ashish again. So students, today I will discuss about a new topic, that is the rocks and landforms. If you just follow in the blackboard, there you can see that the different types of the landforms are actually found in the eastern part of the ridges and the mountains of the east coast of India. Particularly in 1982, Bude first started his exploration about the evolution of the landforms in the eastern part of the southeastern part of Tamil Nadu, and where the different types of the landforms were found and investigated by him in different forms, particularly the dome-shaped landform, which were actually developed over the granitic rocks and granodioritic rocks. And then another form of the land, which was also visible by Bude at that time, that looks like a cone-shaped but elongated pillar-like structure, which is known as the infill bar. And the third one is the highly jointed rock bodies, and they are relatively more weathered and loaded in the form of the residues they were standing there, and that is termed as the toss. So ultimately, these three types of the landforms are still visible in that part if someone visits the southwestern part of Tamil Nadu. Now, how it is formed and what is the significance of such types of the lands or the rocks? First of all, I want to point out that this particular location of the lands are located just behind the mature coastal plain and then the eastern hills or southeastern hills of Tamil Nadu. So now, what is the significance of such study? Because this is the indicator of the landforms, and which also indicate the paleo environment by which the process of the land was evolved through some deep core weathering process initially, and then by the marine erosion process and transportation process took place in that area. So it is termed as the Etchplains formations. Etchplain or the marine Etchplanations in parts of South Africa, particularly on the eastern part of South Africa, and also in our part of India in the southern Tamil Nadu coast, or just behind the younger coastal plain, and then if you proceed further towards west, that is the mature coastal plain, and behind the mature coastal plain, this type of the landforms are visible. So why it is known as the Etchplain? Because the vertical surface etching was developed and produced. So initial landform was in this way, the landmass was there, but later because of the weathering, the deep core weathering process everywhere, and then first of all the surface materials are vertically etched out over the land masses, and by the weathering, the weathering was penetrating into the deeper parts at the tropical hot and humid environment, but temperature is very high. So ultimately, because of the productions of the joints and cracks, and by the exfoliation weathering process, where maximum concentration took place in that area, the granitic core rocks were exposed, and then the remaining residual materials were deposited in the other areas in the form of the pediments. So, the ultimate bare rock body in the dome-shaped formations produced in that weathering and the tropical hot and humid conditions. And then at that time, geologically at that time, the marine erosion process also removed those veneers of materials from that area in the pedimented surface. So ultimately the vertical surface etching, because of the vertical surface etching, these types of the bare rock dome are found, and that is known as the bone heart. Actually, these types of the landforms produced in the arid or semi-arid environment, but in the tropical hot and humid conditions also similar types of the landforms may be produced because of the deep core weathering process. And this is entirely known as the Etchplains. That is the new concept produced or explored by the thoughts explored by Bude in 1982 in our country. And the second one, particularly where the outer rock bodies were dislodged and separated by the weathering activities. So the core rocks, the solid rocks of the interior hills has remained standing as the pillars or the concept forms, and that is known as the Imsen bark, and that is also the granitic core rock area, and weathered and also reshaped by the erosional process by the in that area by the tropical hot and humid environment. So ultimately this typical form of the landform is known as the Imsen bark. So materials which were dislodged from the body of this standing form of the land in the form of the concept, and they are transported and distributed by the marine processes at that time, particularly in the Cretaceous period. So ultimately those materials are transported onwards in the pedimented or pediplain surface areas. So it is now standing in the form of the Imsen bark. And the third one, because of the concentrations of the stress and strain factors and by the minor tectonic processes, the huge joints were developed between the rocks, and those rocks were sandstones, gneissic rocks and granitic rocks, metamorphosed rocks. So in that area, because of the formations of the joints, the block-wise separation took place, and so ultimately it is reduced into the form of the jointed hills. And if you compare with the three landforms, the tors are the almost the residue of the land masses. So in the form of the jointed bodies of the rocks by the deep core weathering activities, and the residual materials which were distributed around the masses of the rock body, they are also later displaced and further separated into the forms of the gravels and pebbles, and then by the transportation of the marine erosion process at that time geologically. So ultimately this type of the tor is still remained. So as a whole, if you just compare, the initial landmass has been converted, separated, segmented into different forms of the rock bodies, and ultimate reduction and the deduction of the surface actually took place by this geological process. So this landform was later in the Pleistocene Holocene climate change times also lateritized in some portions of the dislodged materials where the peneplains were located. So this is known as the vertical surface etching of the land, or that was termed by Bude as the marine Etchplain formations in the southeastern part of Tamil Nadu coast. Thank you. In the later class, I will discuss further about the rocks and landforms in a new formations. Okay.